Well, hello everyone. Welcome to another episode of Certified Forgotten. It is an uncertified week here at Certified Headquarters, which means that you are getting a 30-minute episode of myself and Matt Donato talking about a relatively new release. Normally, typically, alternatively, other things that end with Y. We do have full hour-long episodes with incredible guests that talk about films with 10 or fewer reviews and Rotten Tomatoes. But sometimes it's going to be just me and Matt talking about movies that we saw in theaters not too long ago and trying to suss out how we feel about them, right? Like feel like this is a decide if it's Donato movie, if it's a Monagle movie, or in rare cases, if it's both.
Okay, but like this has more weight. The monkey episode is for those who maybe have not heard other prior episodes of Uncertified or the regular podcast, because Monagle and I have opinions on Oz Perkins. Let me put it that
Mm-hmm.
way. We have had them since the beginning of time, and when I say time, I mean Perkins. All time is Perkins time. But I myself have taken longer to warm to Oz Perkins as a filmmaker than Monagle, let's say, because I just The Black Coat's Daughter, I Am the Pretty Thing, go back and like his first movies, they aren't my speed, they are
Mm-hmm.
Monagle's. But Long Legs bridged the gap. Long Legs was the piece in the nation between Monagle and Donato here. And we both liked it. And that was a big deal. Like it was my first Perkins I liked, but I could also share it with Monagle. And now we're at the monkey. And as Mr. Monagle just said, there are definitions of a Matthew Monagle movie and a Matthew Donato movie, and they're very different. And when I left the monkey, the first thing I said to Monagle was, "Holy shit, Oz Perkins made a Donato movie. It is gory, over the top. It's a midnighter. It's funny. It's horror comedy. I don't know if you're gonna fucking like it." So
Yeah.
we have now reached the point where we have both seen the monkey, and we are going to talk about if this is a shared Oz Perkins victory. I mean, did Ozzy Perk pull it off?
Yeah. Ozzy, Ozzy, Ozzy. Oi, oi, oi. Is it for both of us? We'll talk about it in just a second. But if you haven't seen the film, first of all, you probably should. I think that's a spoiler. We both think that you should go see it in theaters. Everybody should see all horror in theaters. But let's do a quick synopsis for those of you that haven't seen it like 3 times. Shout out Josh Hurtado. All right, here you go. As a boy, Hal Shelburne came face to face with evil, and his life has never been the same. What started with two twin brothers rummaging through the junk closet of their runaway father's closet turns deadly when Hal and his brother Bill stumble upon an unbreakable wind up monkey. Turn the key and the monkey springs to life, picking a person seemingly at random to die. Now, 30 years later, Hal must once again stop the monkey before it kills everyone he loves. An equal mix of Osgood Perkins and Stephen King, The Monkey is a shining example of black humor done right. Let's start the conversation there, Donato, because I think that this is a sticking point. This is I you know me. I'm not a pedantic person. I'm not a necessarily a minutia person. I don't get stuck on things and demand that other people bend themselves to my will. But I can be fussy about horror comedies. So let me start by asking you the question: is The Monkey a horror comedy?
Yes, it is assertively a horror comedy, which I did not know got lost in translation for some, and that is not a negative comment on like, "Oh, you don't get the monkey, you don't understand what it's doing." But I will say, like, when I talked about it with Perry Nemiroff on our live stream, our live chat was pretty filled with people saying, "I didn't really get it. I didn't know if I was supposed to laugh at it. I didn't find a tonal anchor, let's say, something that
Yeah.
pulled me through that let me know what the monkey was about." So where I found it very funny from the first frame, I think the very first scene with Adam Scott and the pawn shop, you know what you're getting into, and I think Oz Perkins sets that tone. I thought well, but apparently there are other people like again, they don't know what to expect from a movie, and there are some ups and downs. Like to find this movie's wavelength, it is so many highs and so many lows. It's going everywhere. It's doing all these
Hmm.
things. There's no straight line here. So while I do think it is challenging, while I do think it's very morbid, and you said it's black comedy 100% here, if you're not into what it's doing immediately, you're not going to find that gripping point. You're not going to find something to hold on to. And I think you might be confused. For me, it worked because that's what I'm looking for. I'm looking for exactly what this movie is doing. But others who aren't are going to be so kind of like left behind, I think.
Yeah. I don't think it's a horror comedy, or at least I don't think it's a horror comedy in the way that we typically think of horror comedies. And my wife has a really good line that she always uses when we talk about TV shows or movies, comedies that she really enjoys. She always describes the most important thing is joke density, right? Like joke density is like 30 Rock has really great joke density. Seinfeld has really great joke density. Other stuff, not so much. The jokes are interspersed and a little bit more, tonally inconsistent. And I don't think the monkey moves like let's give an example like Hard Eyes. Love Josh Rubin as a filmmaker. Love Josh Rubin as a comedian. Didn't love Hard Eyes because I think that Hard Eyes for me is a bit too much of a traditional horror comedy. There's like a scary thing, and then there's a gag, and then another gag, and then another gag, and then a scary thing. And there's like this element of joke density that gets in the way of telling sort of a gripping and evolving intense horror movie. That's always been my knock. We've talked about it a million times, but I do feel like when a horror comedy loses its footing, which is 99% of the time, it's because it can't balance the needs for like repeated humor with the needs for the absence of like slow build stuff that comes with scares and tension and horror and elevating jump scares and all that kind of good stuff. And what I like about The Monkey is that I think it's a very funny movie, but I don't think that it's trying to operate as a horror comedy. I don't think it has jokes in mind in quite the same way that a lot of horror comedies do. I think it thinks that it's, again, to your point, I think Oz Perkins has kind of a weird and slightly fucked up sense of humor that probably comes from all of the horrible things that's happened to that family over the last 30 years. And I think that that is, it's a wavelength is a good way to put it. I think that there is humor throughout, but I don't think it is a traditional like setup payoff of jokes. I don't think it's joking with us. I think it's just amused by itself. And if you also are amused by it, very, very funny. And if you aren't, you're not going to like it. So that is me being a little pedantic in how we categorize this movie. I don't think a horror comedy doesn't quite feel right to me.
Yeah, but, like, if you go back and see what are now deemed some of the greatest horror comedies of all time, like, I'll go right back to The Return of the Living Dead, and that movie doesn't have jokes in it. It is just very funny. Like, it it's the same thing to me, at
Mm,
least in my opinion. Sure, the stereotypes are overblown and eccentric. That's supposed to be a little bit of the comedy. The talking zombie. There are elements that are supposed to be funny, but they're not jokes. Like, they're not setting up punchlines.
yeah.
I guess you could maybe say more brains as a punchline or something like that, but still the humor is rooted in something very dark. I think that's where The Monkey to me earns its place as a horror comedy because the grossness and just absolutely explosive nature of some of these kills. I mean, they did a whole video where morticians watched the movie and were basically making fun of everything because nothing is realistic. But that in itself, like, Perkins wants you to laugh at the fucked up stuff, to go back to what you're saying. Like, I
Yeah.
100% agree. He is not setting up joke punchline. It is not a formal standard kind of thing. But I mean, the motel death alone made me laugh so hard.
Yes.
And yeah, it is brutal and disgusting, and the gore is great, and that is all true. But it's in the delivery, I think. I think a horror comedy is more about the vibe. It's more about what you're feeling because Oz Perkins absolutely could have made the Oz Perkins coded the monkey if he wanted to. But because of the approach he takes and how he kind of carries the film, he lifts it up and makes it lighter despite it being such a fucking dark piece. So I that's where I see it as a horror comedy because if you've made me laugh, that's the intention of it, and it doesn't have to be a stand-up comedy routine. It can be in presentation and other things. So that's my way of interpreting it, I guess to say.
And it's a nice marriage in more ways than just one of Oz Perkins, the actor, and Oz Perkins, the filmmaker, right? Because that's always been sort of the funny uh, disconnect or contrast is that when you think of Oz Perkins as a performer, you think of him in stuff like Legally Blonde, right? Like very funny, very. I know you're going to say Dead and Breakfast,
Dead and
but
breakfast, baby.
so
Come on.
I'll give you Dead and Breakfast too. But like he is when he's on screen, often a very goofy sense of humor. Like that is the kind of character he plays, and he's very good at that. He's in this movie as well. He brings a lot of that, like laughed incredibly hard at the basically the one scene that he gives himself. Um, but he also has the sensibility of the person who made, yes, the Black Coat's daughter, but also Gretel and Hansel, right? Like these really atmospheric and moody and not unpopulist movies, but definitely things that are on kind of his own wavelength. So this feels like it is a marriage of a lot of different elements of what he brings as a writer, as a filmmaker, as an actor, and it works because it's so uniquely him. But I also think it works because others have said this really well. I can't remember who said it first, but like it's such good. Oh, it was Walter Child, the filmmaker, the film critic that does such a good job at film criticism. But he pointed out the fact that the monkey captures the humor that is often present in Stephen King stories, but often stripped from the final product when it comes to movie adaptations. And I think that's great. Like, right, so many of Stephen King's short stories are, or even shorter novels, are about like absolutely fucked little towns. Like this one little town that is basically being dragged metaphorically or literally to hell, and a bunch of shitty people that are along for the ride. It's funny. The people in his books are awful, and it's often funny how awful they are to each other. So this just feels like, I know that we always hail Flanagan as the ultimate King whisperer, and to good measure, but I think that this is something that discovers or taps into a different side of Stephen King, which is the silly side of Stephen King that doesn't have to sacrifice any of the scores, the scares or the gore or the atmosphere to make it happen.
Yeah, I was looking through actually the other, King adaptations. I wrote a piece for IGN, or sorry, Fangoria, and the prompt was simple: is this the goriest Stephen King movie ever? It's basically like Twilight Zone meets Final Destination, and
Yeah.
in doing so, we get the Rube Goldbergian kind of setups for all these crazy kills. Like as I mentioned before, they're incredibly over the top, and not only does he find that humor, let's say, that is present in King, whether it's cocaine fueled or however that came out. Um,
Allegedly.
Allegedly, right? Allegedly, no, but Perkins does find that, and I was looking back on all these adaptations, and it's true. We get the Hollywoodized version of a straightforward horror movie most of the times. You have the things like Graveyard Shift, which I find a little funnier despite its material, a thinner. They're there, but they're never fully realized as, well, morbidly hilarious at times. So I do enjoy that Perkins found that, but again, I enjoy the gore being fucking front and center. I mean, again, that may lose people. This is definitely one of those highlight reel movies of crazy deaths, one after the other, and it becomes kind of a parade at some point. And I do think the story struggles here and there, but Perkins was also challenged to turn a short feature, short written feature into an actual, like, a whole movie. Like he had to take a few pages worth of storytelling from King and blow it out both in the front and in the back. Like we get the meat of what King was telling in his short story, but Perkins had to fill in a lot of blanks. And I was actually impressed with how he did that. This came together better than I expected. Spending more time in the beginning with the children and seeing them as adults later, like the
Mhm.
expansion of it, I think works pretty well.
It's a lot of good adaptation, and I think when we talk about Stephen King adaptations too, Maximum Overdrive feels like it's kind of a good touch point for this. I think this also has Creep Show energy too, right? Like, and not that Creep Show is specifically Stephen King, but this is the version of a Stephen King movie or book where he's like staring at the camera and going meteor shit, right? Like this is in him too. Stephen King is the middle-aged writer who's reflecting on his own mortality. He is the coked up 20-year-old that is writing like these wild, Twilight Zone creep show esque stories. And he is this long form storyteller that, takes a dozen books to conclude a gunslinger series where he ends up writing himself in at the very end of the movie. Like he has all these things. He has so many different modes that he operates in, and that means that when you really have to find the right filmmakers in order to successfully adapt his stuff, as we've seen some really good Stephen King movies, we've seen some really bad ones. But I think that and we're going to get a little bit into the deaths here too, which I don't think, listen, I don't really think that's spoiler territory. I mean, the tagline of the movie, there's literally a billboard in downtown Los Angeles right now that says Jesus kills, or Jesus saves, the monkey kills, right? Like you kind of got to know what you're going into if you're watching it. But I want to use the example in the pool too, because that was in the trailer. The scene where Theo James is taking a phone call at his hotel, and then he looks across the way, sees the woman about to dive into the pool, and then the electrical current goes down the water and hits the pool right as she's jumping in. And part of me was going into that movie and thinking, okay, I don't love the Final Destination movies. They feel sometimes a little mean. Like I love the craft and the, the thought that goes into the Rube Goldberg kills, but to a certain extent, you're just watching like these characters be traumatized and then killed for an hour and a half, which isn't my necessarily my flavor of horror. So there's a part of me that was like the Rube Goldbergness might be a little hard for me to enjoy in the Monkey if there are all these like act of God things where like we have to anticipate a character dying and then they get killed in a horrible way. And then basically every death scene in this movie is a body like fucking exploding. It is the woman in the pool getting hit by an electrical current and fucking exploding. It is the real estate agent opening the cupboard or opening the closet door. The shotgun falls down and then she is blown to pieces. Like these are not serious French extremity deaths. These are Peter Jackson circa late 80s, early 90s kind of deaths. These are big and goopy and explosive, and that's so important to me in making this movie work, because there's a way to do this that's super mean spirited and leans more into the long legsness of it. It's wild to think that within 12 months we got long legs in this, because they could not be more tonally different. But you could have you could have a long legs version of the story that is hard to watch, and instead it is a cartoon. It is cartoon gore, and that's delightful, and that makes it fun and funny without losing any of the horror that it wants to have.
And also refreshing
Mm-hmm.
because it does not repeat itself. Everything it is doing, it finds the most absurd ways to kill people.
Yes.
Talking about the bees, just alluding to that, or the cherry pie, the idea that a body is so mutilated that it pours out of a sleeping bag and is described as cherry pie and or
Mm-hmm.
chili, however you want to look at it. Like that's how it is. And I didn't know Perkins had that in him, and I think that is why it's so important for us not to pigeonhole filmmakers and not to think a filmmaker has one avenue, let's say. Like I've been on video shows for other websites where quote unquote prominent critics are arguing with me that like, oh, why are we hiring Ben Wheatley for Tomb Raider? Like he's never proven he can do this. Okay, well, like why did Jordan Peele make a horror movie? Why did David Gordon Green make a horror movie? They didn't prove anything before that. They had to prove themselves with that movie. And they did. So I hate this idea that as much as, I have said what I said about Oz Perkins because he did have a very distinct style as a filmmaker, and he still does. That Black Coat's Daughter, that I Am the Pretty Thing, Gretel and Hansel, Long Legs, like that's all so ingrained in Perkins's DNA, and that's what he established as his signatures. But now that he's given us the monkey, that just proves another facet that maybe he heard some of those words, not mine, but like maybe he heard a
Yeah.
bunch of people talking about we know what's coming from an Oz Perkins movie, and now no we don't. I mean that's it's just the thing. Like this, if you didn't tell me Oz Perkins directed the monkey beforehand, he'd be like I think I wrote in my review, like he'd be the 75th person I would come up with as to who directed it. And that's awesome. Like I love that. Like I don't
Yes.
want to hate on a director just because of it. Like the idea that I didn't like any of his movies because they just didn't vibe with me, that's a personal taste thing. Like that's what it is. But that doesn't mean I don't want to find one that works. Like it's a celebration when I finally do, and I wish we do get more of this Mr. Perkins. Don't get me wrong. I don't think we will. I think his next movie does look more in line with his profile, let's say. But I just I'm really happy he did this, not just to please me, but it's that hey, I've got something else up my sleeve, or like he has 7 more tricks up his sleeve in the monkey
Yeah.
alone. Hey, I can do humor. Hey, I can do gore. Hey, I can do a midnighter. I could do all that shit, and it's like, fucking a, like prove it. I love that.
I'm with you. I think that, and to me, it's sort of like the Paul Thomas Anderson conversation we had a little bit in our Kate Siegel episode, right? Which is like I feel like I'm on a little bit of an island that as he matures in style, I find I like him less because I like the flashes of personality and the bigger swings and the kind of goofiness that we saw sometimes with the young PTA. And there is, listen, there it's fun to watch. It's fun to watch Nosferatu, right? It's fun to watch a filmmaker go back to a particular mode of storytelling and like really perfect a style, really perfect an ability to do things certain their way, to have, you know, the celebration of auteur theory, that you would know that it was their movie and that it's contained in every essence of every shot and blah 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 blah. But I mean, name me another filmmaker that has the range on their resume. Name me another horror filmmaker in particular who has I Am the Pretty Thing That Lives in the House and The Monkey, or the equivalent, in their same body of work. Because those films you could not make two more different. If you set out to make the most different horror movies you could make, you might be able to conceive of them, but there's no way you could actually get them financed and produced. Like those two movies could not be more different. I love Oz Perkins. I struggle with watching I Am the Pretty Thing That Lives in the House, even though there are parts of it that I really like. It is the most slow of slow burns. It is mood and atmosphere and a lot of not things happening. And then there's the monkey, which is ridiculous and over the top and wonderful. And I like it so much. And I had such a good fun time with it. That yeah, I 100% agree with you. I want filmmakers to step outside of the boxes. I want them to get good at something, and then I want them to go do something else. Right? Like we talk about the fact that, weird ass example, but one I'll know you appreciate. Like Michael Jordan fucking sucked at baseball, man. But his mythos is so much more fun for that half a year that he spent trying to play for the Chicago White Sox, because he really thought that he could do it and he couldn't, but he tried, right? And that's what I like. I like a filmmaker that is willing to go make a movie in a different mode, a different genre, a different style, and fall on their face, because they can do like Oz Perkins can do I Am the Pretty Thing, The Black Coat's Daughter. He could do that all day, every day. He's already proven himself several times. Granted, I think The Black Coat's Daughter is the greatest film ever made, so I would love him to do that, you know, every year like clockwork. But I have so much more fun when filmmakers surprise me, and I feel like increasingly in this industry, it's harder for people to break out of the boxes that they've been put in.
Yeah, the opportunities are, well, everyone just likes comfortability now, and that's in front of the camera, that's behind the camera, that's in the audience. Studios want to know what they're getting because they want to know how successful, or sorry, try to gauge how successful it'll be. And audiences absolutely do like comfort. As much as we cry for originality and all these things, how many times do we turn to a quote unquote comfort movie? I mean, it's all that stuff that just sets a filmmaker up to do the same thing. But man, the monkey being being his stint in baseball, if he's the
Yeah.
Michael Jordan analogy, is way more successful than MJ was at trying to
Yep.
hit a ball, because of the performances too. Like, I don't want to leave that out. I think the performances are incredibly fun. Theo James gets to really play around with two characters who couldn't be any farther on the spectrum of personality. That terrible haircut when he walks out as Bill, and he's in
Mm-hmm.
like the Guy Fieri suit, basically, that he is makeshift made himself. It's so funny too. Like the visuals that Perkins draws up, even his character he plays. Perkins is playing the uncle character who's a hunter and these huge mutton chops, and he's talking about being a swinger while he's dressed like he's going to a party but still in camo. It's all very good. It's all very quirky. It's all very weird. But I do want to give enough kudos to the actors because they all feel like they belong in this universe. They
Yes.
all feel like they are a part of the world that Perkins is building. And whether that's Christian Convery, who's playing young Hal and Bill, also a great job portraying them. Like, we have two great roles of the same character in completely different age gaps. Sarah Levy fucking dies horribly, but has a great time doing it.
Yes.
It all belongs here. Rohan Campbell, the bees. It is just not about him being a little grunge weirdo, like a little kind of like fake metalhead, all that stuff, and wanting the monkey so bad. But he dies horribly, and again, he has a great time dying horribly. So I was taken aback by not only how Perkins, for as much as the tone bounces around, as much some people might have a problem with that, it all still feels connected somehow. It all feels like it belongs in this movie. It's not one of those movies that a horror comedy that forgets one part of it, whether that's the
Mm-hmm.
horror or the comedy. I think everything here is intentional. I think it makes you think about some things and leaves questions open. If you need answers, probably not this movie, because I did see some people complaining about the ending too, how it just kind of ends abruptly. But again, I don't.
That's how Stephen King's
Yeah,
stories end. Like the fucked up like the town is fucked, right? Like
right.
that is the perfect grace note. You cannot part of I don't know, maybe this is the meta commentary in it that I like, but like, oh, a book or like a story that ended with an apocalypse but maybe felt a little clumsy. Yeah, that's a Stephen King ending. That is a 10 point like stick the landing kind of thing. If you're trying to make a Stephen King novel, you have to make an ending that maybe is like a little clunky, but also great in terms of what it means for everybody who survives. So yeah, I get that, but I also it's so thematically appropriate.
Well, I was gonna say, and the thematic ending that we get and the message that's received, at least I thought was a good wrap up because you do get the idea of, well, death is coming for us all. Tatiana Maslany gives a great monologue talking about death to her children
Yeah.
and being like, hey, you're gonna die someday, and maybe you're gonna get decapitated, maybe you'll die in your sleep. I don't know. Shit happens. Hope it's not the bad one, but it is such a, again, almost Flanagan-esque bringing that up again, brilliant little monologue that gives you so much about the character, so much about the tone, so much about everything. But going back to the ending, I think we get what we need from it. We get the ending that tells us, hey, death is coming for us all. You can either let that ruin the rest of your life, or you can go about living your days and put a smile on, go to the amusement park, do whatever you want. And, if the roller coaster flies off the rails, it's your time. That's it's just what it is, and
Yeah.
embrace it.
Yeah, glad that you gave some flowers to Tatiana Maslany because this is like I've always liked her. I've seen her in a bunch of stuff dating back to Orphan Black, but this is one of those like, oh, a filmmaker really you as a performer and a filmmaker were on a very similar wavelength, and you guys managed to lock into a character, and it goes really well. I also do. I'll give some shout outs to Theo James too because one, I am a sucker for voiceover. I know some people hate it. I love voiceover and sort of like the very grumbly, pissed off narration that Theo James gives as both characters, the kind of like reluctant, angry, resentful narration we get throughout the film is so funny. Like funny in and of itself, works really, really well. But I think that The Monkey is also the latest piece of evidence I have that any movie where an actor plays two characters is just better than other movies. If you're looking at adaptation, if you're looking at, I could name a million of them. They're just good. They're just fun. Anytime that somebody's like, let's have one actor play two characters, it is such a swing right there that you set yourself up for the kind of movie you're going to enjoy. If you want to watch two Theo Jameses play off of each other, if that seems like something that's fun for you, then you're gonna like what Oz Perkins and James has to do. I just like it. It's so dumb. It's one of those things you could easily do it a different way, but they don't, and that's great. It is an easy tell for me if I'm going to enjoy a movie is if they have one actor playing double duty.
And it's Theo James. Oh man. Well, I mean, like Hal is Hal, Bill is Bill. Bill
Hmm.
has gone off the deep end. Hal is definitely in his head the entire time. I just love the juxtaposition he finds. I love the way that he is able to differentiate them like there's nothing crossover. These are two different characters despite them being identical twins. And same thing that doesn't work for me always. I kind of think it's a hokey thing sometimes.
Yeah,
I
exactly.
like I think it works less than it does, but when you have someone like Theo James just diving headfirst in, and once again saying how everyone feels like they belong in this movie, I this is as much a showcase for James's talents as it is anything else. God, everything coming together at the end too. The bowling
Yeah,
ball, everything. It's
it's
good. It's
uh,
fun.
there are two rules I have in movies, and they typically are proven to be true. If one actor plays two roles, it's such a silly, like pompous choice that I typically end up liking the movie more. And if a movie is broken into chapters, I often like it more there too. So Osgood Perkins has done both. So good on you, Osgood Perkins. I'm very happy about that. All right, so the monkey. It's the Donna movie and a monocle movie. This is it. This is the perfect Perkins film for you and I. This is the most we're probably ever going to agree on, and we both liked to varying degrees. We both liked Long Legs, but I think the monkey is it has everything I like, which is big swings from a filmmaker. My old adage about being willing to have some people dislike it in order to truly be great. It's got the goopiness and the goriness and the midnighter vibes that you typically go for. So somehow, in the middle of all the madness, Oz Perkins made a movie that makes every Matt happy.
Yeah, I mean, I'm gonna just say this is my favorite Perkins. I
Hmm.
know Long Legs is a good movie, but this is the four quadrants of Matt or Donato, I should
Hmm.
say. You've hit them all. You gave me exactly what I wanted, and especially not expecting it. I do think seeing it early and not knowing anything going in was the best possible way to see the monkey, because once we started writing about it and once all our reactions came out from the first wave, I was already talking about the gore, I was talking about what to expect, and that set people up to know what to expect. But man, not knowing anything about this movie and getting the intestine rip pawn shop kill just to start off, I was like, Mr. Perkins, what are we doing here? So
I seem to have misjudged you, Oz.
yeah, like literally, I need to go back and reevaluate everything I've said. So I really do want to shout out how sometimes the perfect way to watch a movie is just completely blind. And I know that is near impossible in today's environment, let's say with social media and everything, but nothing better than getting completely blindsided by a movie. And the monkey did that for me. So best Perkins.
And final shout out to Neon. They advertised the monkey. I mean, they advertised Long Legs perfectly. You could not run a better campaign than they did. And they did it again with the monkey. Completely different tone. And I feel like the advertising, the trailers, like everything, like I will never not laugh when I think of that smash cut in the trailer to the priest popping out and going, "Oh shit." Right? It's good. Like a trailer can do a lot of bad things for your movie, but every now and then it'll sell a difficult tone and let you know what you're in for. And The Monkey is the movie advertised on the tin. If you like the trailer for The Monkey, you're going to like the movie because that wavelength is honored, and it is represented in every frame of the film too. So Neon is killing it. Their marketing department right now is as good as it gets in this industry.
And they have quite the relationship with Mr. Perkins. This is turning very fruitful for both of them.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. Who would have known Long Legs and the Monkey are what audiences want? I'm so happy. I feel vindicated even though I was never looked down on for my love of him. Whatever. All right, that's it. Monkey's playing in theaters right now. I'm probably gonna go see it again. I want to go see it a second time. So I will be one of the people that goes and sees it in theaters. Please join me if you're so inclined. Matt Donato, how do people follow you on social media if they want your takes on all things Oz Perkins and anything else you might be working on in the horse sphere?
It is at Donata Bomb on Blue Sky, Letterbox, and Instagram, most prominently. You will see all of my South by Southwest coverage that is going to start hitting starting March 7th, which I can't believe is around the corner. So lots of South by stuff coming your way if you're following me. A lot of horror movies, a lot of good stuff there. The Accountant too, not a horror movie, but apparently it's very I literally convinced one of my Canadian friends who's a critic to come to South by for the first time just because they're so stoked about The Accountant too, and I did not know that kind of love was out there. So hey, I'm going to report on The Accountant too, if that's anything for you.
I do love The Accountant. I am one of those people, I'm afraid to say. So, into that. Please don't get measles while you're in Texas. This state super fucking sucks.
I am, trust me, I've been watching everything going, oh, cool, all the plane news, all the measles news. We're fine. Everything's fine.
Just walk here in a bubble. It worked for Jake Gyllenhaal. As for myself, you can follow me on social media. It's monocle.bluesky.social and visit certifiedforgotten.com. We are finally back in the business of starting to a little bit publish some new content, some new articles and essays from some of our favorite contributors. Make sure you follow us on the two social media platforms we still use for the site right now, which is Blue Sky and Instagram. And make sure you subscribe to this podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcast, YouTube Music, or your podcast platform of choice.